everyone.
Hey! So we were trying to decide what to do for our second video, and it was a beautiful day today. So we decided to come outside and kind of have a conversation about what to do once you're in the hospital and things to avoid to keep from having more complications. So just background for everybody. This is TJ. And I'm Lauren. We've been married for 9 years, going on 10. And in July, TJ was 35 and he had a stroke out of nowhere. And it took almost 48 hours to be diagnosed. He had multiple complications. He was in and out of ICUs and hospitals for 3 months before he could even begin therapy. Or begin rehab, or even know what was going on. So it was a very difficult time for him and for me, and we're not the only ones who went through it. There's a lot of people who go through this that you can't even imagine, and I'll get onto that. But today we thought we would go over the first few days at the hospital, what happened, and what we would change. So anything you can think of that happened in those first few days? What's the first thing you remember?
Being busy.
Being dizzy? But I mean, once you were at the hospital, once
Oh, it's kind of blur.
it was a blur. So the first hospital misdiagnosed him. The second hospital got the correct diagnosis and sent him to a third hospital where they had a neurology department. So there was a lot of transferring, a lot of transfers of information. It was very fast once they had the diagnosis, so we didn't get a lot of information. It was just a blur. When we got to the first hospital, I remember I was with my mother-in-law, and we were driving behind the ambulance, and the ambulance, we lost it in 5 seconds. They must have really been going. And so we headed to the hospital, and I remember being, I guess, somewhat on autopilot. You just know this is happening. I'm not going to react to it until I'm by myself. So I just kind of kept going and was running over in my mind that they had told me he had a stroke. They didn't tell me where. They didn't tell me anything that other than it was bad. And that was all I knew. When we got to the hospital with the neurology department, he was in the he was in the ER, and they spoke to us in the ER for a few minutes, and after about an hour or two, we got up to the ICU, and by that point, it was 4 o'clock in the morning, and the ICU, every hospital is different, but most ICUs will have a time frame of when they will close down their, ward for changeover or for the nurses coming through. So ours was 7 to 9, and I had just gotten there, and I felt like I was in a trance. I did not know what was going to happen. When I got into the ICU, they started asking me questions. Is he an organ donor? Do you want life support? What would you want? And I was standing there, and I had this thought process through my head, I kept looking over at his mother, that's his mom. I'm his wife. When did this happen to me? Where I was making... That's a car coming down our road, apparently really likes their music today. But yeah, I couldn't even believe I was making these decisions out of... so sudden. I was 28. Didn't have any really experience with this. So when they were asking me all these questions, I was just he's 35, yes, save his life. That's about all I knew. And they were very sweet. And the ICU people, they in our particular ICU, I'm so thankful we got there at that hospital, because they had such a tender kindness for us, the situation we were in, the amount of time that we ended up being there. It was just they were very supportive, very understanding. At the rules were you couldn't sleep in the ICU room. I would not leave him. They knew I wasn't going to sleep any other way. So they made it happen. all of that to say that we were completely unprepared. If I could go back and redo this again, things I would watch for. First off, when you see someone has a stroke, their blood pressure goes up massively. So that's a good sign that if they're having balance issues, inability to walk, inability to stand, facial droopiness, and not speaking correctly, mind changing, neural changes, things that you just don't think are quite right, and you take their blood pressure and it is up really high, that's a good sign that something's wrong. In my husband's case, his blood pressure was 200 and something over 120 or 30, and it was just out of control. That was our first thing we ran into, was just trying to control his blood pressure. Well, while we were distracted on that, we missed a lot. So when somebody has a stroke, you will have a speech therapist, physical therapist, and occupational therapist come in and evaluate them pretty quickly once they're in the hospital. Don't let them speed you through this process. Make them take the time, because in the case of the speech therapist that worked with my husband, she was very good, and he wasn't showing signs at the time of having difficulty swallowing, but he was having difficulty swallowing. It wasn't going down the right way. He was swallowing harder and harder, but my husband was so determined to do it that he didn't mention that he was struggling. He didn't want anyone to know he was struggling. So by the time we found out he was even struggling to swallow, he was in full-blown aspiration pneumonia and had just had brain surgery. Not a fun mix. So when they first get into the hospital, you don't know what part of the brain was affected, but they're going to check everything. Every 30 minutes, they're going to come in and they're going to ask them, who's the president? What year is it? Where are you at? Do you know your name? Do you know how old you are?
Your name, birth.
Your date of birth. They asked him who the president was, and I got it wrong, and he corrected me. We knew his neural function was great then. They'll come in every 30 minutes and ask that stuff. But other things that you are looking for them continually touching their throat, having issues with the muscles in their throat. They will kind of do that when they're swallowing. And it'll be just regular spit. So you will notice it while a speech therapist is only in there for like a half an hour watching them eat. You're there all the time. So, or you will be there more than they will. So watch their throat, watch what they're doing, watch their hands. If they're coming up to their throat and making gestures in that vicinity, something may be wrong. And if that happens, do not let them eat anything or drink anything other than water at very small amounts until you get a follow-up with a speech therapist. And if you still have doubts after the speech therapist says that they're fine, I would request a swallow study before they eat anything else, because that is such a drastic thing. I don't know the exact numbers, but a lot of people who have a stroke die because of complications caused by aspiration pneumonia. So it is very severe. It is very scary. I remember multiple times him not breathing because he couldn't cough, because he had just had brain surgery and he had aspiration pneumonia and he couldn't swallow. And it was very, very drastic. Avoid that complication at all costs. Take your time. Do not let the excitement of your spouse or your loved one doing well convince you that they can get out of the hospital sooner than they're actually ready. If you have any doubts, bring them up. Ask the questions. Be very thorough, because once they're out, you're somewhere else and you have to start over from square one. And that is not easy to do. There was a time I let them transfer him somewhere else, and I wish I had not done that. So, I would recommend just be very, very thorough. If you have any questions or you have any doubts, don't be afraid to tell people off. You are the only person who is 100% there for your spouse or your loved one. Everyone else is there doing their jobs and the best that they can, but they have to spread their attention between 9, 10, 11, 12 people. And on that note, be understanding. If your nurse has not come into the room after you've called her 5 times, do not be the person that gets very irritated with them, because you have no idea if they're picking up a person vomiting in their room, I had a lady who, TJ had to go to the bathroom. We called her, and we would call the nurse's desk, and they'd say, yes, we'll send somebody. We'll let his nurse know. And 10, 15 minutes later, she still wasn't in there. TJ really had to go to the bathroom, and he needed assistance getting up. And he was telling me, and I called again. And I don't know where his nurse is, but I'll get somebody in there as soon as I can. I said, well, he really has to go. And a few seconds later, we got a different nurse. And she came in. She helped me and her work together because she was a much smaller woman than our original nurse. And he was very unbalanced. He could pull you down with him real easily. And she came in. And then a few minutes later, I see his nurse come back. And she says, I'm so sorry. And I said, what happened? Where were you? And she said, I had to go change and everything because a guy who had C. diff had a blowout accident and was just very unable to help and assist and made a huge mess out of his room. And she just ended up stuck in the situation at the exact time that we were asking to go to the bathroom. So you never know what that nurse is dealing with. So if anything you can do to learn what your husband may need and figure out how to do it safely in case your nurse is not available at that exact second, I do recommend that because it helped us. Because when we got home, I had some knowledge that helped me feel safe and comfortable taking care of him. Any additions on that comment?
No.
No? Did you like your nurses?
Yeah. They're all good.
They're all good. Do you have any recommendations for what to watch out for when you first have a stroke, or what process you went through?
I said just be patient.
Just be patient? That's good. That's a good one. It is slow. It is very, very slow. And there are no easy answers, and there is no guarantee. And as a family member, if you have somebody going through this, a loved one, the support is so important. Being there for those people. We couldn't have done it without our support system. We could not. I don't know how I would have done it without the support and the people showing up. And it was a crisis for me, but I wasn't by myself. Many times I had people showing up and just giving me the support I needed. So that's so important. And also be careful about asking too many questions right away and pushing for information, because like I said, when we first got to the hospital, we knew nothing. And then we got him into the ICU and we still knew nothing until the next day we didn't have the results from the MRI. And so we were learning things as they were happening, and then things were going wrong after that. So things were changing instantly. We would have a few family members that just wanted as much information, and I understand. They really just cared, and that's awesome. Wanted information very quickly and couldn't get it. And they just wanted to know what was going on. Be patient, because that's what we're doing at the hospital. That's what the family members are doing, and the loved ones, and the wife and the husband. It's all about being patient. And it's months. It is not weeks a lot of times. So the same support that you give at the beginning, do your best to continue it. Try to remember that at 5 months, the shock may have worn off for you or the people back home, but it is still an everyday struggle for your stroke survivor. They're doing so much more work than they're used to doing, and they're relearning, changing everything every single day. There is no break. There is no downtime. So any support you can give them, whether that is encouragement, calls, love, financial support, notes. One of the best things we got was just this lady who sent us notes, little notes, and wasn't even a family member, just a lady I met, and she would send me little notes when I was in the hospital, and it was awesome. Just that little bit of support, that little bit of somebody cares, was really helpful. So aspiration pneumonia, avoid it, don't want it. Don't expect information super quickly, because it will be slow. Do not let them discharge your loved one, even if they say they're doing great, until you have gotten all of your questions answered. Okay? That does not mean you're going to get the answers you want, but that does mean that you have the right to those answers. So if you have any suspicions, any questions, be kind, be understanding, be patient for them to run those tests. If you're going to ask for the test, be patient. It could take a day, it could take 2 days, but at least they're still in the hospital. And ask the questions and learn everything that you can as you go. It took me forever to figure out what type of stroke he had, but I was researching every one that I could, asking questions of the nurses. There was a wonderful nurse that printed out information for me. So you have the right to ask questions. And that may be what saves you. And I'm not saying you're a stroke survivor, but you yourself as a caregiver. It may be the thing that keeps you held together because you're not out of the loop. You feel powerful. You feel like you can do this. So educate yourself as much as you can. Reach out for support from your family and friends. And don't expect an immediate answer. And if your family and friends are pressuring you for immediate answers, be honest with them as well. Because right then, you kind of are the most important thing. You and your loved one. Everything else, you can block it out. You can deal with it tomorrow or the next day or 5 months from then. Do the best that you can with what you've got. And always just remember, doctors don't know everything. We don't have all the information. We don't have all of the knowledge. And pray. Pray. There's not a single doctor in that hospital who could have guaranteed a result, right?
Yeah.
No, not a single one. So, I relied on God. He relied on God. Our family relied on God. People prayed for us that I never even met in my life. And it was amazing.
Even some of the nurses.
Even some of the nurses, yeah, we had some of the nurses pray with us, which was just amazing. And thank God for every day. Even the rough ones. Because it's another day. You don't have a guarantee of recovery. So be thankful for the progress you make on a daily basis, because that's what gets us through. Right?
Right.
And the determination to do everything we can. And pray and use what we go through and what we experience to glorify God. That's the plan. Right? Anything else to say? Because I've filled up 17 minutes and I feel like this video is going to be unliked because I took too long talking about myself. So...
No. I'm not the caregiver.
What?
I'm not the caregiver.
It's about the caregiver? Yeah, I guess this one is more about me in some ways because he was out of commission during that time period. But I think it's important for you to know that there are so many things you can watch for. And if you know somebody who's gone through a stroke, realize that not every stroke is the same. So I'll get on that in another video. But thank you all for watching. I really hope that this helped. I'm sorry if I talk your ear off. I talk a lot.
Thanks for watching.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.